welcome. My name is Daniel Lustig, and I'm with the Hispanic Political Action Committee, HISPAC. And we're here tonight with one of the candidates running for Lake Worth Beach for the Commission District Number 2, Christopher McVoy. And we're going to be asking some questions. Lagia News is here asking questions as well as the Florida Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So in that regard, I'm going to ask Mr. McVoy to provide us with a quick introduction.
Ok, buenas noches. Gracias al HISPAC por por su trabajo con la comunidad hispana aquí. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Christopher McVoy. I'm running, as mentioned, in District 2, Lake Worth. And the reasons that I'm running is that as I've lived a long time in South Florida. I came to South Florida originally to work on Everglades restoration. By training, I'm a hydrologist and soil scientist. And I've lived in Lake Worth for approximately 20 years, owned my home here for just under 20 years. And as a scientist, I bring a very strong commitment to facts and to governing on the basis of facts and evidence, and also an analytical approach of analyzing problems based on those facts. In addition, I've been fortunate in my life to have lived, before living in Lake Worth, to have lived in other parts of the world, and including doing the field work from the University of Florida in Turrialba, Costa Rica, which is where I started learning Spanish, and started developing a sensitivity for, at least at that point, Central American culture, and then later worked in Mexico for a while, and have had a number of other ways that I've been involved in different parts of the Hispanic community. I was very actively involved in some of the protests for conditions in Venezuela. As I'm sure all of you are aware, the dictator there is a serious problem for the country. And I've been involved somewhat with an organization that works to protect and free and support the families of political prisoners in Venezuela. So I've had, and I've also worked here within Florida to try and help defend rights of immigrants, and have been to Tallahassee to lobby on behalf of those things. So I bring both a cultural interest and a scientific approach to it. I see in Lake Worth, from having been here many years, we have a number of difficulties, a number of challenges. We are, as you know, one of the poorer communities in Palm Beach County. We have great diversity, economic diversity, cultural diversity. We have a big Haitian community. We have a smaller African-American community. We have a large Latino community. Some of that, a large portion of it is from Guatemala. We have a range of political status in the community. And we have a range of issues that come with that, many of which I'm quite familiar with. And I feel very strongly as a candidate that I need to support all parts of the community, not just the 2,000 out of 30 to 50,000 residents, not just the 2,000 who vote regularly, but also those who we would like to have voting or who would like to vote if they could, but are residents here and have real issues in the community. So that's part of what makes me motivated to take time out of a scientific career to serve in public office in this community.
Thank you, sir. And we're going to go first. Is it Dr. McVoy?
I am doctor, but I don't insist on it particularly, so I'm quite comfortable with Christopher or whatever you like.
All right. Well, you earn your doctorate, so I'm going to call you doctor. Dr. McVoy, okay. I'm going to yield the floor to Mirta Loases with Lagia News, and she probably has a question for you.
Dr. McCoy, thank you for being here tonight with us. I noticed that one of your goals when you get elected is to bring the residents back into decisions that affect their life. How do you plan to do that with the Hispanic community?
Well, a very good question, and thank you for the work that HISPAC is doing, and I'm sure you're all volunteers doing this, putting your time and energy in to, and we talked earlier about the importance of increasing the vote from the Hispanic community. I very much support that. I feel in this community that it's not enough for City Hall to say, well, everyone is welcome. Especially in this community, there are cultural issues that a big part of the community, the Hispanic community, simply is not going to feel comfortable coming to City Hall. Sometimes they do. I think we have to do more outreach. I would actually like to move some of the biweekly meetings, have some of them in locations that are more comfortable. It's a little bit of a hassle with the technology, but I think it can be done. Move it to one of the Hispanic churches. Move it, if we had a cultural center, move it to that. We don't. But there are some art centers that could be used that are in the middle of that community, the Hatch Center. That's one way. Obviously, como yo hablo español, and I will make that clear to people, people will feel free, I hope, to call me. I also, in the process of campaigning, knock on lots of doors, and I keep track of people who I've talked to, try to keep their contact information and reach out to them after I've talked to them, so that people feel, okay, this is a person who I can talk to. Yo puedo hablar o puedo llamar y decir, bueno, hay este problema, me puede ayudar. That, I think, is part of what I bring to it. And beyond that, I will be meeting with leaders in the community and say, can we do small meetings periodically and just have people come, like small town halls? Also, now that we are using the COVID technology, you know, the Zooms and things, I'll do some of those. Whether that will reach out to that community, I don't know. That I have not tried yet, but my commitment is to make sure that we push hard to be more inclusive and more open, and not just announce it, but actually reach out more actively.
You think of an advisory board to the City Hall, to the City of Lake Worth Beach, or some kind of advisory board, Hispanic advisory board that might help?
I think it's an excellent idea. There are challenges with it because of the sunshine law. So if a group meets, they can only talk to each other in the meeting. They can't talk to each other outside of it, even if it's an advisory board. I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but it does complicate things a little. But one or another form, whether it's an official advisory board or an informal one, whatever works best, yes, definitely. Some way to reach out more actively. I would certainly be open to that. Another issue maybe related to that, probably all of you know that Lake Worth schools don't have the best reputation, particularly the high school and the middle school. That's a very big concern for encouraging families to move to Lake Worth. I think that a key piece of that, from what the research I do, tells me that when you have active parental involvement in schools, they tend to do better. I think in the community we have, again, a cultural barrier, linguistic barrier that makes it hard, and practical barrier. People are working hard in this community, a lot of them. That means that not that many parents are involved in the school. I want to make sure that we try to reach out, again, find ways to encourage that, make it easier to do if it means providing some childcare so a parent can come and leave their younger kids in a group area and talk with the teachers, anything, because I think that over time will improve. I don't think the teachers are the problem. I think it's trying to get that more active parental involvement is a piece of it.
Thank you so
And it's a
much.
piece that we can work on.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you
you.
very much. Next, I'm going to yield the floor to Mr. Juan Pagan.
Hola, buenas noches, Dr. McCoy.
Hola, buenas noches, gracias.
Now, one of the questions that I have, I see that you've been involved with some organizations like the Black History Month, groups. You've been involved with the AFCLO, CIO. But then I haven't seen, looking at your background, I haven't seen, and I say congratulations, the time you spent in Latin America and all that, because that's something we share, because I used to manage from Mexico to La Tierra del Fuego.
Wow. That's a big territory.
And I was in Peru when Fujimori was the president, you know,
Right.
and Sendero Luminoso was up in the
See.
mountains, you know.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, the point being that I don't see any in your background involvement with Hispanic organizations that currently exist in Lake Worth and currently exist in Palm Beach County. How come?
Well, that's a good point. The formal organizations, there was a neighborhood organization that was active for quite a while called, it had a name that was concerned me a little bit, but I understand where it came from, Comité del Defensa del Barrio. They basically tried to pull mostly the Guatemalan community together and do community cleanups, do education, because there, as you can imagine, there are cultural issues of when you come from Guatemala, things that might work there don't maybe work quite as well here. Needs to be some adjustments. So I worked with them quite a bit. I've been involved with the Centro Guatemala Maya Centro on and off on various activities over the years. I've been involved on some of the immigrant organizations protecting rights of immigrants here in Florida, but formal organizations, no, not so much. I'm not aware of, I mean, I'm open to that very much, but that hasn't tended to be how I've gotten involved.
You know, I don't intend to criticize anything like that. It's just a point, it's an observation that
Yes.
that might be a way to get integration into the Hispanic community.
Yeah,
Whether it's
no.
the Guatemala Mayan Center, or whether it's La Caridad Center, or whether it's El Centro La Esperanza, or whether it's El Sol, whichever it might be, doesn't really matter.
All of those, I know people who work at them, and some of the directors, and I've met with them on and off. We actually, you may remember, we tried to do a center here that was somewhat like El Sol to help with work training, to help make a more formal way for people looking for employees to be able to meet them, so it wasn't happening on the street. We got a lot of back pressure and from some parts of the community. I think it maybe wasn't managed as well as it could have been, so it disappeared. But the concept of doing something like that, I think, makes a lot of sense, and I would like to see that come back. There are real, you know, everybody in this community is very quick to say that they like diversity, which I think is great. As you dig down a little bit, sometimes people aren't so comfortable with certain things, and that's where I would like to, you know, bring some of it. Some of it is simple as cultural. The Guatemalan community, again, the Ikbalam is one of the organizations that does social, cultural things. They elect a princess every year. They do a dance. They do some things. Get more, and I'll say it, white folks, gringos, to come to some of those things and see some of the cultures, because the preservation of some of the traditions is quite strong. And I think that interests people. Again, bridges is what I'm interested in. And also to give pride in the folks who are first generation, the kids that are growing up here, help them negotiate being part of two cultures, that their parents are still sometimes mentally in another country, but they're in school with American kids here. Especially in the Haitian community, I see challenges with that. And so those are some of the things that I would want to bridge.
You know, and I would like to follow up with the question that Mirta was asking about, you know, advisory committees. And I understand the sunshine law, you know, from A to Z, you know, so because I was a lobbyist in Tallahassee for 15 years. But one of the things is also, if you look at some of the cities, and I'm going to pick an example, West Palm Beach, the mayor, Keith James, he created a task force that is called the Racial Ethnicity Task Force. And essentially it's to deal with the diversity that is in the city. It's also got to do with employment. It got to do with businesses, small businesses, you know, and how we're going to get the community to work together. And then also when we look at the diversity, yes, you have the Creoles, Haitians, you know, you have the Hispanics, you have, you know, the African Americans, and you have the rest, you know, in there. But then why would that be an obstacle for a city like Lake Worth Beach?
You would think that we would have done that a long time ago. when I went to, because I've been a commissioner in the past, I went to one of the annual League of Cities conferences in Nashville. I didn't know anything about Nashville. At that time, the mayor's office had an office of New Americans. And I thought, wow, what a great name and what a great way to project to people that as you become new citizens, we welcome you. And we're here to address the issues that go with that community. Nashville's obviously a lot bigger than Lake Worth and probably has more resources. I think they had 17 commissioners or something. We're at 5. So there are limits just in terms of our resources, but there's a lot of stuff that we could do in that direction that we just haven't. And, you know, I can't tell you exactly why. When I was on the commission before, I tended to be the minority vote. So I can't necessarily create things. In this election, there's a chance that people who are more of this mindset have a pretty good shot at getting a majority. And if we did, that would be the kind of things that we would definitely go for. One of my, well, we'll come to it. I'll bet it'll come in some of the questions. If not, I'll raise it later. But when you mentioned small businesses, and that's something that I pay a lot of attention to here in Lake Worth, and it relates to the Hispanic community.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Doctor, the next, it's gonna be Sam Roman. And Mr. Roman's gonna have a question for you.
Thank you, Chairman Daniel Lustig, Dr. McBoy. Thank you for being here with us. I just have a few questions, and one of them is, what's the difference between you and other candidates? If elected, what will you do different than other candidates running for this position having their platform?
I think the big difference is the other 2 candidates are both good people. Neither has had the degree of involvement in the community that I've had, but they've had other involvements. Ryan has been a neighborhood association president. I haven't seen a lot of activity with that neighborhood association. It happens to be the neighborhood I'm in. But he also has some involvement in solar energy because he installed solar panels, which is great. It's an interest of mine also, and I've been very active. I actually got the city to be certified to make it more likely, more easy to do renewable energy in the city, which I think is very important for a coastal city. Carla is a very good person, very positive person. She's volunteered a lot in the community, but she isn't going to bring the same analytical skills to it. And she doesn't have any connection to the Latin community in the way that I do. So those are some of the big differences. In terms of platform, I am very interested in growth of the community and development of the community, but I'm very concerned about how that happens. How does it happen in a way that recognizes what we already have here in Lake Worth? And Juan earlier mentioned small businesses. If you've been around Lake Worth and walked different parts of it, or you've gone to the little restaurants, I've eaten in almost all of them, the little El Salvadorian one, the Bendición, that's mostly Guatemalan, there's Nicaraguan, there's a whole range of them. They're small. And then there are a number of small businesses that do envíos to other parts of the world or sells products. They look small. I think the administration that's been in power for the last 10 years overlooks them a lot. One of the first things that I would do is make sure that we do, even at a very low, simple level, low key level, an economic analysis and get a sense of how much money is going through those small businesses. And I think we're going to find it's a lot bigger than people think. It's that there's a lot more movement in those than you might notice. Then make sure that as we work on development and new building in Lake Worth, we make sure that we're finding ways to not push out those small businesses because they're dependent on fairly reasonable rents. And as we develop and we move at certain directions, it's very easy to push all that out. And there's no place for them to go and no places to have business. We need economic growth, but we need to be aware of what we already have. And that will take some trickiness. That's an interest of mine that I don't think is as present for other folks who are running for the office.
My other question is, do you have the time that it takes to serve as a city commissioner?
I do. I've done it before. It's variable how big a time sink it is. Obviously, you have to go to meetings. You have to do some backup research for those meetings, or at least I think it's a good idea to do it. In addition, I always told the city, don't put some city number on the website. For me, put my cell phone number on. And I would get calls very frequently. And sometimes people would call and they'd be taken aback a little bit, like, oh, you're the commissioner? I'd say, yep, I'm the commissioner. How can I help you? And I might answer. If it sounded like they were more comfortable in Spanish, I'd switch to Spanish. Or if they were more comfortable in Creole, I might say, are you comfortable with French? I always made it my business to be as available as possible. And I feel very strongly, if you're going to be in elected office, you need to be, that's why I'm there. And yes, I do have the time. I have a flexible research schedule. There are times where I have to be out in the field, so I may be out for a day, but I've got my phone with me. So I can still deal with some of those things, and I can get to meetings and I can do the research. Yes, I do have the time.
Thank you.
And the commitment, which is a big part of where the time comes from.
Mr. Arroyo?
Yes, Mr. Christopher. Do you have any specific goals or projects that will benefit our Hispanic, non-Hispanic residents of the city of Lake Worth Beach? Any specific goals or projects?
I mean, I think some of them are ones that all of us, probably all the candidates support. We'd like to get the Gulfstream Hotel going again. That will probably create some jobs that would definitely affect the Hispanic community. It's not totally under city control, but we can help. And I've been supportive of, the whole community is very supportive of that happening. Hopefully the funding will come through for that to go. So it's rolling a little bit. I very much support keeping the beach very much a public beach. There have been a number of attempts over the years to kind of tie that and make it a little bit more private. My concern with doing that is, as you tend to lean it toward a more privately operated beach, certain parts of the community do no longer feel as welcome, and things start shifting a little bit. I want kids, especially from the Hispanic community, to feel comfortable to go to the beach. I think that's a very healthy place for people to be and for families to gather. The pool, I don't know how much the Hispanic community uses the pool, but I know that seniors in this community do use it, and a lot of kids have learned to swim in that pool. It's been closed for a long time. I was always opposed to that. And I would spend a small amount of money, get the thing open, make it accessible, work at attracting, especially for swimming lessons, because you don't want to learn to swim in the ocean. That's no good. When you know how to swim, fine, go in the ocean, but learn in the pool. So those are two specific ones. Probably the biggest one that has very direct effects is our electric utility. If any of you have been around Palm Beach County for a while, you've all heard, oh my God, don't move to Lake Worth, the electric bills are horrible. You will hear, or you may hear from some of our other candidates, because I've heard it at other debates, we've dealt with the electric, it's not a problem anymore. We lowered the rates, they're basically the same as FP&L. And to that, I would say, yes, at a technical level, that's basically true, that our rates are not that different from other communities. We're pretty similar to other municipally owned utilities. We're not that different from FP&L. It's maybe 10% different at most. However, I will tell you that anybody who tells you that it's no longer a problem has not gone and knocked on doors. I know that for a fact, because I've done it many times over the years, and I'm hearing still that concern. And I have an explanation for it. It's because people don't care what the rate is that they pay. They care the size of their bill. The size of the bill is based on usage. And when you have a lot of older structures that were built at a time where nobody was doing AC, They were not intended for AC. They didn't think about AC at that point. They thought about ocean breeze ventilation. So the windows open fine, but they also open fine when they're closed. And when you try to insulate a box or to cool a box like that, you're working uphill. So some of the things that I would work on is I would bring back a very strong program of energy audits and energy conservation to help those structures. I would combine that with, there's some very interesting nonprofit banks and some profit banks, regular banks, but there's some nonprofit ones that are specifically targeted to energy conservation and to middle and low income families. And use that as a way to help people want to invest in their structure. I know people in this community, in the Hispanic community, who are currently renting, have been here a while, and would like to switch over to be homeowners. They need the incentive to make that jump. They need better community policing, better sense of safety in those communities, and they need the help from the electric utility. I think if we do that, and we work on what I talked about earlier with the schools, bringing that up, I think we will see more folks saying, you know what, I like Lake Worth. I want to actually invest in a home here and make it, and as you know, and I told this when I interviewed with the realtors, they're very well aware, cities can't take care of all of those home structures. It has to be done at an individual family level. The more that we can do to encourage families to choose to put an investment in, the more our community strengthens. So those are some of the pieces, some of the ways that I'm thinking about to try and move things in that direction. I'm not sure if that 100% answered your question. So if it didn't, please feel free to ask me again. But
Oh, yes, thank you very much.
All right,
Definitely.
and I think I'm the last one to go. Dr. Magbo, you obviously are a scientist, so you have an understanding of land use, probably, because that was your specialty. Um, where do you think your knowledge in science is going to uh, have, or how do you think it's going to have a positive effect on the composition of the board when if and if you have um, Hispanic businesses that may require some form of special zoning because of I don't know, the type of business that they operate? Are you going to be able to get past the science and look and see how that will increase the economic um, uh, welfare of Hispanic businesses in Lake Worth?
okay, if I understood the question directly, I think at the beginning you mentioned that my science had a land use background. That would not be 100% correct. I happen to have had a long-standing interest in planning and land use. That's a personal interest. It's not a training, but I have been involved in it a lot. My actual training is much narrower than that in movement of chemicals through soils. I've done environmental history. I've done a range of things, but my and I think your question gets. I just want to make sure that I'm not, claiming something that I don't have in terms of training. In terms of I think the gist of your question is wonderful that you're a scientist. Scientists can be kind of a little bit narrow in their focus. The issues in Lake Worth are much broader than that. And one of the things that I want to be very clear to people when I run is, yes, I care about the environment. I will make my skills and knowledge available for environmental issues. But I've been here long enough to know that the issues that affect the city are much broader than that. One that I worked on a lot before was traffic calming. We had lots of concern around the whole city that people speed through the community. And for some reason, our administration was quite resistant to doing traffic calming. Fortunately, they have finally done more of it. There are still places where I'm hearing from people and seeing that needs to be worked on. That doesn't have anything to do with necessarily businesses. I think what I heard from you also is, am I open and able to think about issues that go out of the science world that might relate to land use planning and zoning, particularly, and I think it might relate a little bit to what I was talking about earlier. We have a lot of small businesses, especially in Lake Worth, often Hispanic owned or very heavily Hispanic, customers. Am I interested in and open to ways of making sure that those continue to be able to operate here? And yes, the answer is very much so. As I mentioned earlier, one of the first things I do, and I don't know, maybe that's the science because I like numbers and I like working off of data, is I would make sure that we find a way to do some quantitative studies so that when I'm advocating on the commission, hey, we need to think about what we're doing on our development, make sure that we're not pushing out folks, that we're making a way to have storefronts that can do that kind of thing, because that's not what's visible on the main part of downtown. You have to go west of the main part of downtown, or you have to go up and down Dixie to find some of that, or a little bit off on some of the side streets. Are we going to be conscious of that and find ways to make sure that can continue? So yes, I'm very, very interested in that and very able to think beyond just the science.
Okay, thank you very much. And that brings us to a closing. Would you like to-
Daniel, before,
Yes, sure.
I just have one more quick question, Dr.
Sure.
McBoy. There are some areas of the Lakeward Beach that are mostly populated by Hispanics.
Mhm.
And then the streets and the lighting leave a lot to be desired. So obviously investment is needed in those areas to repair the streets, to put the lighting that is needed, because obviously the lighting is related to crime, and things like that. So what can you do about that?
I pushed for, and that's a good question, and you're quite right. And the issue, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of encouraging home investment, I know families, Hispanic families that have been renting, would like to buy in the area that they've been living, because it is a community there, and are concerned about safety issues. And lighting is a piece of it. The quality of the policing is a piece of it. The appearance of the area, as I'm sure you know, certain areas with a certain appearance, it doesn't, foster a sense of security, and it tends to foster things that you don't want going on there. So yes, I'm supportive of lighting, particularly when the community wants it. It's varied. There are communities that have different feelings about it, but not in that one. I supported strongly. It was called a performance contract. It was an interesting way for the city to be able to finance an upgrade in their lighting. That was done, don't quote me on the exact year, but around 2015, 2016, in that range to 2017 probably. That contract is pretty much complete. So I don't know that we have a way of adding lighting on through that, but I would certainly push for being creative. If you don't need to put up a pole and somebody's willing to have it on the corner of their house to give some more lighting, let's do it that way. If there's some other clever way to do it, let's, we own our own utilities. So the juice is not necessarily that big an issue. Let's figure out what are the barriers. One very simple one, it's not going to fix major problems, but a simple one is make sure that the same way the website has a way to report potholes, make sure it has a way to report streetlights that are out. That's just a minor thing, and make sure that we then respond to that. Make sure that that's part of the website, at least that part, and maybe more parts are accessible multilingual, so that people can feel comfortable to, hey, here's the location, and use modern technology. Our phones know where we are, so you say, hey, put it on your phone. Here's the app. There's a street light out, and the app knows where you are, and boom, it reports it to the website. That's the kind of thing that's easy to do. We should be doing more of it. So yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Would you like to, nobody else has questions? I take it. Are we good? Yeah, okay. Do you want to give us a closing statement, Dr. McBoy?
I'd happy to do it. I think we've covered most of the things that I would talk about. Basically, I would reiterate that I'm running because of a strong desire to bring more open, more transparent, more participatory government to a city that has a very strong diversity. And I feel that I have both language skills, but also cultural skills that make it more likely that I can pull in and reach out to different parts of the community and do activities, whether it's advisory councils or different organizations. I'll do whatever I can, any input I receive from people and anything I can come up with, I will be putting pressure on my colleagues. They all know that I speak Spanish and that I have a vested interest in the Latin American community, the Haitian community. I was just on Haitian radio the other week and Haitian television last night to try to reach out and make sure that all parts of our community know that they have a voice on the dais. In addition, we're a coastal city. Sea level rise is not as bad a problem here as it is in Miami and parts of Broward County, but it's on the horizon. We already have parts of our city that do flood, that are close to the intercoastal. The intercoastal is connected hydrologically to the ocean. As the ocean comes up, we have issues. We already have issues with saltwater intrusion with our shallow wells that supplies our water. Those are technical things that I have knowledge and expertise in that I will be helping. I will be looking at innovative ways that we can be planning for that to protect the coastal resources. In our community, the most expensive real estate is closest to the water and it's the lowest elevations. That real estate supports property taxes that keeps the rest of the city going. We need to make sure that we're planning ahead so that they can continue to be there in one or another way. So I bring a kind of unusual set of skills, a very strong commitment to open government. When I was a commissioner in the past, a former county commissioner in Miami-Dade County organized for a number of years something called the Good Government Institute. It was a semester-long program every weekend that brought in all sorts of experts in many different aspects of municipal government. And she brought in bipartisan candidates, people who had a strong commitment to municipal government, who were already in office, to help give them more tools to be even better elected officials. It was an excellent program. My biggest complaint about it is that Katie decided at some point that she needed to put energy into her grandkids. She'd done it for 5 or 6 years and she needed to retire from it. But I would love to see somebody else doing that because it really was a wonderful way to strengthen municipal decision makers. I see myself not as a politician. I'm not terribly good as a politician. I see myself more as a representative of the community and as a decision maker, somebody who's bringing some extra tools to that and a commitment to listen to everybody in the community and try to make wise decisions that benefit the most people. So that's why I'm running. And here I am. I'd love to have your support in el apoyo de la comunidad hispana el 9 de marzo. Vota por mí.
All right, thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure and honor to have you tonight, and we look forward to election day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm very glad that you're doing it.
Thank you.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.